What's up everybody, Thralls here once again. I'm Necrotic Nick and I have an album review for you. So one that I had my eye on for the week of the 15th of July was the newest offering from Molder, Engrossed and Decay. This comes out again on the 15th of July on Prosthetic Records. This band formed in Illinois in 2017. This is their second overall full-length and first one on Prosthetic Records. I actually have two copies of their debut album, Vanished Corpses, because I wasn't sure if one was a bootleg or not, so I ordered another one that seemed more official. Turns out they were both official, they just had different prints. Anyway, this is flat out old school death metal with a big thrashy, punky vibe to it. That's kind of their thing in general. This band also features members of Granulated and Cryptum as well. Their vocalist, Aaron Pankey, was their drummer and vocalist at one point, and then recently in 2019 switched over to guitars and also vocals. And these guys love old school sounding death metal and maybe thrash metal and punk in there too. This whole album has a very distinct sound of like mixing bands like Obituary and Autopsy with bands like Toxic Holocaust and The Accused. Lots of D beats, lots of thrashy sections, big heavy grooves, kind of similar to, again, what you would hear in Obituary, maybe Jungle Rot, maybe even Bolt Thrower, because, I mean, I hear a double time groove with a sick riff over it. That's kind of the band I think of. The album's opener, Gluttonous Remains, kicks off with some creepy samples of stuff dripping and maybe oozing as the music slowly fades in, which is kind of cool because it kind of fades in on like a drum and bass part, and you get to hear how thick and sludgy the bass is. And the production here is very old school. And I think it might be partially due to the fact that Arthur Risk is once again involved in another release. He just did the mastering on here, but overall, like, the sound of it is just very old school. Like, this sounds very late 80s, early 90s, just in terms of the overall kind of more organic sound to it. And by organic, I mean it's something that's living, that's rotting, because that is pretty much the entire vibe of this album. The guitars, while they are slightly compressed, have a really thick, sludgy tone, and the riffs pretty much just call back to, again, all that early, like, death metal, kind of death thrash sort of sound. But there is such a punky vibe throughout this. In fact, I would say on almost every track on here, there is a D-beat section, or it's a D-beat that carries it. Now, I love D-beats. D-beats are fun. That's the rhythm of the fucking mosh. But I think maybe D-beats on every track might be a little bit much, but I mean, it still kind of carries on the fun. Like, this kind of flows like a Toxic Holocaust album, except with maybe more groove and slightly more dynamics. Like, they want to switch it up a little bit, but they kind of switch it up to just other cool old school nods. Case in point, the title track, Engrossed and Decay, starts off with a very sludgy, Sabbathy riff. It sounds gross, kind of oozes its way through, and then all of a sudden you're getting into more thrashy territory, and you get these really cool galloping chugs that really drive the song. It's absolutely one of the catchiest moments on here. I just love this fucking riff, and even closes with a nice, almost kind of hardcore tinged breakdown, which breakdowns are all over here. This is definitely groove central when it's not doing a D beat or a fast thrashy rhythm. And I like those subtle little doomy slash death doomy nods that are on here, like the opening of Restless Pestilence or Huff the Stench. Yes, these song titles are fucking fun. Restless Pestilence is the only one that has a cool rhyme scheme on there. There's also Decomposed Embryos, which I think is, well, gross, but also, I mean, kind of clever. Huff the Stench opens up with a really cool slow drum fade in, and then you get these giant single chords which just, you know, ring out doom left and right. And even Ghastly Mutation starts off very slow, playing kind of the same riff, but they play it different ways as the song speeds up, which that was kind of a cool thing I liked too on Chemically Dissolved. Like, it starts off slow, playing the same riff, but it slowly keeps picking it up with like every couple of measures, like kind of slowly ramping you up. It was a fun little trick, I liked it. And those are kind of moments on here where they step outside of the formula, because the formula is very straightforward, very meat potatoes. They stick to their guns, and their guns are, again, old school death metal mixed with punk and thrash metal, and you hear it literally on every track. There are tons of like down-picked, just nasty punk riffs left and right, groovy death metal breakdowns, faster thrashy sections. Occasionally get some stuff that is a little bit more death thrash, like just in terms of the speed and the riffing, like you get blast beats and tremolo riffs here and there. But most of the time it's just these big, chuggy, lumbering riffs and just, you know, fun D-beat grooves kind of all over this album. And I have to say, with like the horror themes on here, because if you're looking at the album cover, yeah, no, they definitely like horror. None of this struck me as like horror that's supposed to be just intentionally scarier than hell. Like, this isn't like The Exorcist or like 28 Days Later, where it's supposed to unnerve you and just make your skin crawl and all the jump scares are supposed to freak you the fuck out. This feels more like Evil Dead 2, Army of Darkness, where, yeah, it's gory. It's definitely got some horror shit all over the place, but it's intentionally campy and fun. And that is kind of the vibe of this entire album. Like, there's a self-aware sort of vibe about this, especially with, you know, the ridiculous song titles in there. Like, they're not intended to be malicious or sinister in any sort of way. They're just supposed to be kind of fun and goofy. And occasionally the same can be said for some of the riffs on here. Restless Pestilence has one of the most oddly catchy riffs on there, and there's this weird sort of bounce to it. Like, it's the kind of riff where you don't necessarily see like the dude with all the hair draped over his face just sort of grimacing and grunting in the microphone. Like, you swear as soon as you lift the hair up, dude's probably smiling. And honestly, I wouldn't blame him. It's a very strange sort of, I don't want to call it poppy because it's definitely not poppy, but it feels happy to be disgusting, I guess. It's one of the most distinct and interesting hooks on this entire album. And as this album went on, that became kind of a thing where a lot of this kind of repeated itself. But granted, it was a lot of stuff that I liked. So this became, I don't know, kind of a chore to listen to, just in the sense like, yeah, I'm listening to a lot of cool stuff, but I'm listening to a lot of cool stuff I like. They repeat a lot of the same dynamics across this entire album. And granted, they're good dynamics. They're time-tested dynamics. They're dynamics I still listen to this day. It's just, they kind of, you know, wear out their welcome maybe a little bit towards the end. It's like I said before with, you know, D-beats. I love D-beats, but there's a lot of them on here. I think virtually every track on here has a D-beat, and there are just times there where, like, I really wish they would break it up a little bit more. Like, there are sections with really good blast beats or kind of more of that single bass hit, thrashy blast, or even the more death doomy moments that kind of pop up in here to sort of break up the, well, onslaught of D-beats. I think those could have been used a little bit more to sort of break up the pace of the sound because the songs kind of run into each other. And again, while I like the riff work, I think it's fun. Again, there's some really clever fucking riffs on here. When you have kind of the same tempo from song to song, the riffs start running into each other too. It's like, you know, you're kind of just following the rhythm. It's like, yeah, it's kind of accenting the same part of that drum beat because the drum beat's kind of the same here. And again, it becomes a little bit too repetitious. There's not a lot of like lead play or solos on here. Like, there's a couple of like quick leads that are here and there, like mostly just dive bombs. And occasionally you do get like a brief harmony too, but most of the time it's just driven by how chunky the riff is. And honestly, the thing that I like the most is probably the vocals. The vocals are so gloriously over the top. This guy found this sweet spot between John Tardy and the frontman of Accused. And it's just fun. Like, honestly, that delivers so much of the campy fun on here. I mean, with a different vocalist that was probably trying to sound a little bit more serious and not so over the top, I don't think this would have been as interesting. Like, I don't think I would have been as engaged. But with this dude's vocals just being ridiculous, but in such an awesome way, that really kept me in this. Musically, I think you could pretty much take everything that this band delivers and kind of put it into a nice little box. Box would probably look something like this, so, you know, be careful with it. But, you know, while it is sort of repetitive and it kind of stays the course on one particular thing, there wasn't anything I disliked on here. Like, honestly, as kind of samey as it did get towards the end, like, it was still fun. Like, and I think that's the main thing about this. This is, again, kind of just a fun release. It's kind of goofy. It's kind of self-aware about its horror tropes and everything. And that made it a little bit more endearing. I've listened to a lot of Meat and Potatoes albums that do a lot of the same stuff as this album, but they don't come across as much fun. Like, this actually kind of brings out the fun. And I really dig that. Like, I think sometimes death metal may take itself a little bit too seriously. Hell, I think metal in general sometimes takes itself a bit too seriously. And I like seeing bands that are kind of just like, yeah, this is about, I don't know, zombies and shit. Huff the Stench, what's that about? I don't know, maybe fucking farted in the car and hit the window lock and turned on the heat. I don't know, but it's fun. It's kind of ridiculous, and I like that. That's the thing that really kept me in this one. So overall, I'm going to give this 3 stars. It's a fun album. It just kind of, you know, does one thing a little bit too much. Granted, that thing it does is fun, but I would like to see a little bit more variety in the song structure, like maybe not lay on particular things too much. Like, in between all the riffs that are kind of similar, there's some really cool ones. Again, Restless Pestilence, that is one of the catchiest odd riffs on here. And, you know, the good chuggy breakdowns and some of the doomy atmosphere is really cool too. I just think there needs to be more of that. Like, I just want to hear this band do some like slightly different stuff. And this album is like over 40 minutes when it probably could have been like 30 minutes or 35 minutes because, again, a lot of repeated stuff. This might have been good as like 2 separate EPs and sort of like mix up the tracks and get ones that are not so similar on 2 different EPs. Either way, I still like this material. I strongly recommend it if you're a fan of, again, Autopsy, Obituary, Accused. I'd even say Toxic Holocaust and Power Trip too. Like, it just kind of has that vibe overall. If you're looking for something that is just straightforward fun from start to finish, I think this would pretty much do it. Like, again, this is just something you put on and maybe watch like a fucking goofy zombie movie in the background. It just kind of has that aesthetic. Would totally match the fucking vibe of that. I wouldn't go as far as calling it like pizza death metal or anything like that, like how people try to knock on, you know, thrash metal bands that just like to talk about goofy shit. But it has kind of that vibe. It's just a fun release and you guys should check it out. So, if you enjoyed this review, give it a thumbs up, and if you are new to the channel, subscribe because we do stuff like this all the time. We are also on Patreon. If you'd like to help us out there, there'll be a link down below. There will also be a link down below to thrallsmetal.com to get one of our kick-ass shirts. And as for Denver Death Fest, announcements coming soon, I assume. I don't know. There might be one coming today. I don't know these things. They are just pretty much getting that shit together so they can make a nice big announcement because I believe every spot is filled up in this festival. I think it's like 30 bands. And yeah, I'm pretty excited. And if you're excited for this, this will take place September 30th through October 2nd in Denver because that's where the Death Fest is, because that's what we keep saying. We'll be there. A lot of bands will be there. So we hope that you're there because, well, that would make it even more fun. And as always, thank you guys so much for watching, subscribing, all that stuff. We thoroughly enjoy doing this. This has been a ball so far. And yeah, I run out of things to say in this part of the video usually. So I'm just going to wrap it up and say thank you once again, because you guys know I'm just going to ramble on about the thanky stuff, and it's just going to get weird. And it'll be weird for you and you and you, me, probably you too. So yeah, let's just wrap this up, and thank you all once again, and we will catch you later.